You may have heard the news already, or maybe not. On October 3rd, it was announced that the Lithuanian government passed an amendment to a law so that foreigners and companies employing them are required to serve clients in the Lithuanian language. This requirement will come into effect on the first day of 2026. Why was this change to the law necessary? Will it be effective? What are the possible benefits and drawbacks of this new policy? I want to explore all of this for today's video. Alright, first, the details of the new law. As mentioned in the introduction, services will have to be provided in the official language, Lithuanian, at the level of proficiency set by the government. According to International House Vilnius, A1 level of Lithuanian will be required for those who carry out activities on a regular basis. As LRT notes, the initiators of the draft law believe that such a provision will encourage foreigners to integrate more into Lithuanian society and learn at least the spoken national language. The explanatory note of the draft law states, "It is believed that citizens of the Republic of Lithuania should have the right to be served in the national language." Now, I read somewhere, I can't seem to remember where, that a language requirement already applied to foreigners working under contract who served in a field where they had to deal with the general public, or something like that. But then, this law didn't apply to freelance, self-employed workers like Bolt taxi drivers and Bolt's food or Wolt food delivery workers. Again, I can't remember where I read this, so please correct me if I'm wrong. I do specifically remember reading that this latest amendment was specifically brought forward to address the self-employed foreigner segment of society. Anyways, the requirement will come into effect on January 1st, 2026, and individuals engaged in one-off activities, such as selling goods at fairs, are exempt. Exemptions also exist as noted in the Law on Science and Studies of the Republic of Lithuania, and one example is lecturing at universities. The implementation of the new amendments will be the responsibility of public authorities, companies employing foreigners, managers, and the foreigners themselves. So this means that we don't yet have specific details on how companies will screen and enforce the law when it comes to self-employed workers. Alright, that's what we know so far, but why was this necessary in the first place? Well, as I briefly mentioned earlier, it looks like the new amendment is mainly targeting food delivery workers and taxi drivers working for companies like Bolt. These are technically self-employed jobs, and people take these jobs as freelancers, what many people these days call the gig economy. Now, anyone who lives in Lithuania and has used such services may have experienced the exact reason for the language requirement. My wife and I definitely have. Sometimes we'll hop into a Bolt taxi and the driver only speaks Russian. It's not a surprise anymore that the driver isn't Lithuanian, and so it's almost assumed that they won't even speak the Lithuanian language. The language barrier can be problematic when you're trying to communicate something outside of the plan that is detailed on the app. But I think if you're taking a taxi, in most cases, using some pointing with your finger and body language is enough to communicate something at a basic level, in most cases. It's a similar yet more challenging situation with food delivery workers, at least in our experiences. Through no fault of the delivery worker, apartments are sometimes badly labeled, or they aren't easily displayed on the smartphone app. Unfortunately, these kinds of situations require a phone call to the person who ordered the food. It might require the customer to describe which entrance or building to go to, and no amount of body language will help with this. A few times now, we've had to just run downstairs to meet the delivery person just to make it easier. My wife told me that her friend, a Lithuanian, had ordered food and could see the delivery worker out the window. On the phone, this worker only spoke Russian and could not understand the instructions given to him in Lithuanian or even English. I believe he just needed to cross the road or something like this. But, frustrated, he marked the order as undeliverable, and the customer watched her order disappear into the distance. I'm sure some Lithuanian-only speakers will have encountered different and maybe even worse situations, and I can totally understand this frustration. You live in Lithuania, Lithuanian is the official language, and I would agree that Lithuanians have the right to expect a service worker to be able to speak at least some of the official national language to them. That's completely reasonable, right? So I get why politicians have put this requirement in place, but will it be effective? Not everyone thinks so. Here is what an experienced Lithuanian language teacher thinks about it all. Dovilė has taught hundreds of students to speak Lithuanian for many years, even offering them specific preparation to pass the A2 state language exam. And so here's her take on it all.
According to Seimas, the problem we want to solve is that Lithuanians don't understand some service providers. And the solution is for service providers to learn Lithuanian so they can communicate at A1 level. Lithuania already offers free language courses for residents, which is great, but there is an issue with the regular A1 level courses. In an A1 course, we usually teach people how to introduce themselves, talk about their family, and basically how to be a customer. But a taxi driver or courier would need to learn how to understand directions well. We only cover this a little because in everyday life, it's not that important with everyone using Google Maps today. So why make someone spend so much time on a course that doesn't really prepare them for the job?
As I said to my wife as we discussed the news, having to learn A1 both over-prepares and under-prepares the target group all at the same time. So given what Dovilė is saying, I too somewhat question the effectiveness of the policy if the language standard is something so general. Could there be a better way? Well, here's what Dovilė suggests.
A specialized course for each profession would help those in customer-facing jobs learn the specific phrases they need. This would also be more practical for part-time workers or those who don't plan to stay in the country long-term.
I agree with the idea of a specialized exam. I think a course and test focused on directions, location, time, etc. would be most helpful. Otherwise, I feel like it's a potential waste of everyone's time. In the short term, it's a waste of time for the foreigners learning the language so they can work in a specific job, and it doesn't benefit customers who still wouldn't be able to effectively communicate many important details to a worker. Don't get me wrong, learning A1 will still be good for foreigners so they can use the Lithuanian language in public, outside of their work, in local businesses, and with locals in a social setting. While I wholeheartedly agree that workers should be able to speak some Lithuanian, I do wonder about how this will affect the industry in the big picture. Will there suddenly be a shortage of workers because the system isn't properly set up to test and certify in a quick manner? Will this lead to increased delivery costs and longer wait times? We will have to wait and see. As a foreigner who works from home, remotely, for a foreign company, these changes don't apply to me. But I think these kinds of rules can really fast-track someone's language journey. If people had to learn Lithuanian to a certain level to stay in the country or to keep their job, well, I think many people would have that extra motivation they need to get it done. Because you know what I've learned about myself? I would need motivation like this to learn faster. My Lithuanian language progress is going to continue to be slow and steady because it's not a priority for me. Have no doubt that I'm picking up new words and practicing the language with my wife every single day, but I'm sure there are foreigners, such as eager Ukrainian refugees, who have accomplished my level of Lithuanian in 6 months, while I've lived here for 4 years. Dovilė is of the opinion that a positive incentive should be introduced rather than the threat of losing work. Here's her opinion on that.
In general, instead of making language learning mandatory, it would be better to encourage it. It's difficult to force people to learn a language, especially when they have comfortable circles where another language is commonly used.
I agree that carrots are better than sticks, but I differ from Dovilė in that, to me, a stick is better than nothing at all. But in the current situation we're in, I feel like some of these impacted companies, Bolt and Wolt, should maybe offer language learning credit or subsidies if it wants to attract and retain workers.
With all this in mind, it seems like the goal they say they want to achieve might be something else. I'm not sure what it is, but some say it's about protecting the Lithuanian language. However, I don't think Lithuanian is under threat. If we look at the history of the Lithuanian language, it's never been in a better position than it is now. It's used daily by most of the country's inhabitants. Foreigners are learning it, and we never had so much content, books, movies, TV shows, podcasts in Lithuanian, and people are actively creating and consuming it. So I don't see a threat here.
But what do you think about all this? I'm sure some of you are foreigners in Lithuania who may even be impacted by these new changes. So it would be interesting to hear from you. And then Lithuanians who watch these videos, I'd love to hear from you as well, particularly about your experiences as customers and if you think this legal amendment will actually solve the problem. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. If you enjoy this channel and want to support me in making more videos, please consider becoming a Patreon patron. There's a link down in the description for you to check out. Thanks so much for watching.